down and don't feel blue. Wez and Larry are here for you. So don't feel sad and don't feel low. Just switch on Wez and Larry's TV show.
We'll make you laugh until you blow. A super freaking awesome TV show. Wez and Larry's Top 10 show. A super freaking awesome Top 10 show. Oh yeah!
Rip-offs. The only thing the video game industry is guaranteed of doing over and over is an easy way to make a quick buck.
Make one innovative title on your own that becomes popular, and you can bet your bottom teeth that everyone and their mother will be making a clone of it within the next 18 months.
So this episode, we pay tribute to publishers' lack of originality.
Hi, I'm Wez.
And I'm Wez.
You're ripping me off now.
You're ripping me off now.
Now you're ripping off my accusation.
Now you're... oh, never mind. I'm Larry, and we welcome you to the Top 10 Gaming Rip-Offs.
Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, it's now time for Wez and Larry's Top 10!
Seeing quick blue streaks across your eyes either meant you're about to suffer a stroke or you're playing Sonic the Hedgehog.
Sonic proved that small Western European mammals weren't just to entertain children seeing them run over on motorways, but also as massive money spinners for ailing Japanese hardware manufacturers.
As this episode is dedicated to games that ripped off known titles, you're probably expecting us to start ragging on Bubsy the Bobcat right about now, a title infamous for copying Sonic, like we usually do. But can you believe there's actually a title out there in the gaming ether that actually rips off Sonic more than Bubsy?
No.
I know, it's hard to believe. But there is. Sonic Time Dominator stars a shifty-looking blue duck of the same name who must speed round levels whilst charging himself up by sticking his bum in a mains power petrol pump thing.
Surely sticking your rectum into a power outlet is an original concept?
Well, yeah, but it's the only thing in this game that is. But going back to Bubsy, Sonic suffers from the exact same problem that was a Bobcat's Achilles heel. You can't make a fast-paced platformer if you constantly have to stop and start in fear of hitting an enemy.
This single issue alone destroys any fun that can be had with the game, rendering it a slow-paced chore and the complete opposite of what the designers intended it to be.
They also thought they'd try and be a bit cleverer than Sonic by invising maze-like levels, rather than a straightforward start-to-finish escapade as you usually expect, and you end up being stuck in holes every 5 seconds, unable to get out.
Ironically, the guy who created Sonic the Hedgehog, Naoto Oshima, nicked the time-changing mascot idea back with Blinks the Time Sweeper for the Xbox, Microsoft's supposedly own equivalent of Sonic and Mario for their system. Unfortunately, the game was also a nightmare to play, with its overly complex controls and decidedly average gameplay, and thus sold about as well as a copy of GTA 4 at a pro Jack Thompson rally.
But Sonic proves, as well as a lot of our top 10 lists, that simply cloning a good game doesn't necessarily make yours a good game also. And so apart from having an incredibly stupid name, Sonic the Time Dominator ducks his way in at number 10. Now get me some orange sauce. I'm in a crispy fried feeling tonight. Alright then, I'll just set for a burger then. Or rather, burger time. It's one of those arcade games that America went mad over in the 80s, hailing it as an all-time classic. Well, pre-Nintendo days anyway. But us Brits were just a bit meh about it.
For those of you who have never seen it before, it's simple enough. You play as a chef by the apt name of Peter Pepper, who has to unhygienically trample over oversized burger parts to make a complete hamburger at the bottom of the screen, whilst avoiding eggs, pickle slices, and what I pray is supposed to be a walking Savoy hot dog thing.
According to my lying brain, it's loosely based on the early career of Gordon Ramsay. Except in this, you throw pepper at your enemies to incapacitate them, instead of constantly hurling obscenities in their direction.
Hang on, why the hell would anyone want to eat something that's been trampled over by a fat Gordon Ramsay is anyone's guess? Meh, Still safer than a kebab.
Now you're probably thinking, who would have the audacity to rip off such a food-related title about the trials of a minimum wage chef? It's bound to be a licence for some fast food burger franchise, isn't it? And you'd be in the right direction there, as our ninth position rip-off goes to surprisingly unknown title, Mr. Wimpy for the ZX Spectrum.
If you don't remember Wimpy bars, then you either don't live in Britain, live in an area that no longer has them, or are under 12 as they were bought out by Burger King in the mid-90s and only a handful of branches remain. But their mascot was Mr. Wimpy, a giant beef eater with a large nose.
It was usually portrayed by a poor trainee standing out the front of their restaurant dressed as him, handing out leaflets, before being rolled down the street by a gang of teenagers.
So why Ocean would want to make a computer game on one of the most physically assaulting mascots in history is a total mystery.
Now what differences are there between the two? Well, Ocean were aware that you can't use eggs and hot dogs as your enemies, so they're obviously copyrighted foodstuffs. That is, unless you give them incredibly stupid names like Oggy Egg and Sid Sauce.
And since Wimpy don't put pickles in their burgers, they replace that enemy with a walking spoon. But then again, I've yet to come across a Wimpy bar that puts spoons in their burgers either.
They also changed the burgers slightly too. Instead of creating freshly grilled patties on a bed of lettuce, they opted for the more traditional raw beef placed on a pink J-cloth burger. Yum yum.
In all fairness, they did attempt to have one original level at the beginning of the game, where the lovable beef eater would traverse across a room full of moving manholes and a flying jellyfish. If this is actually a real hazard from working in a Wimpy bar, we'll never know. But at least he's clean enough to always use a tray to carry them.
Mr. Wimpy is the first of many titles on our list that slipped below the lawyer's radar, simply because it was British. That or they couldn't be bothered to look at our side of the pond for copyright infringement. But it's also one of gaming's earliest examples of getting away with plagiarising a popular title by simply slapping a licence on top. But Mr. Wimpy fries in at number 9. It's hard to imagine now how the video game world was like before Grand Theft Auto came into fruition. How did we manage to fill our free roaming sandbox carjacking innocent person running over bloodlust?
The only sandbox game apart from Driver, Elite, Body Harvest, Driver 2, Frontier Elite 2, Driver 3 and Hunter on the Amiga.
Shut up. But GTA 3 was a revelation. If it wasn't for that game, society would have never found it socially acceptable for 12-year-old boys to assassinate mafia members and plough down ladies at night in stolen ice cream trucks, would it? That and certain narrow-minded business newspapers would still only have the video games give kids epilepsy allegation to leech off.
Sure, there's been loads of sandbox titles trying to take GTA's crown over the years since, like The Getaway, The Godfather, True Crime and Pinball Construction Set, but there's only been one to get anywhere near close, and that's the title that gets our number 8 position, Saints Row.
When Saints Row was released in 2006, it was pretty much a surprise to everyone. The whole press was expecting a poor man's humdrum copy of GTA. You could almost hear the keystrokes of them cutting and pasting their snideful comics in preparation. But what THQ and Volition managed to pull off was nothing short of a miracle. It was like an unofficial sequel that actually improved on the formula even.
It fixed the aiming system for starters, something that plagued the GTA series since day one. And it even managed to take a jump start on GTA by being the first console sandbox game playable online. Even if the co-op mode was a bit crud, it lagged to hell, and the only mode worth playing was the VIP pimp mode. But boy, did I love to slap my teammates when they dissed me. Whoosh.
Good times.
Good times.
Saints Row was good enough for GTA 4 to rip off some ideas back, like the sat-nav and the ability to use your phone to navigate all options and services.
It also ended up having a far superior soundtrack to GTA 4 as well.
It really just gave the whole franchise a run for its money.
Although Saints Row mostly takes its cues from GTA San Andreas rather than any of the others in the series, it was good enough to get a sequel of its own and just goes to show that not all rip-offs can be considered inferior clones of the original. And so it drive-bys its way in at number 8.
Tetris, arguably the biggest selling video game of all time, and also the most played. Anyone out there in TV land who's saying they're not played it is a blooming liar.
Who could have fathomed that the most played game in history was a product of communist oppression, where failure to meet the ever more demanding tasks in the game resulted only in death?
That, and apparently, according to psychologists, girls like it as it involved tidying up. No joke.
There's been about 500 million knockoffs of Tetris, so let me have a guess what it is. Columns?
Nope.
Super Puzzle Fighter HD Turbo.
Nope.
Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine?
You're just going for ones with stupid names now, aren't you?
Well, yeah.
Well, it's not any of those, my friend. 7th position on our list goes to Tetris.
Tetris? It's the same blooming game. How can it be ripping itself off?
Well, it's actually Tetris, the Soviet mind game that's on the cards here. An ever so slightly different game to the one Nintendo released. You see, when Microsoft, owned by the late Robert Maxwell...
Poor old Captain Bob.
Yes, very funny. Well, when he bought the rights from the Soviet state, he assumed he actually bought the whole rights to the game, when in fact those sneaky Ruskies swindled him into only buying the rights to the computer versions of the game.
The oldest trick in the book. Con a fat pension money stealing newspaper tycoon and make him look a complete fool.
So when Microsoft released a NES version in 1989 under their Tengen label, they weren't aware that Nintendo had also bought the rights, this time for consoles and handheld machines. That was until they received a very angry letter from Nintendo demanding they pull all copies from shelves.
So, did they?
They had no choice, but in the few weeks it was released, it made the game so incredibly rare it's one of the most sought after titles in the NES library, with copies going for anything up to £600.
Wow, 600 quid for a game about blocks. I wonder how much my copy of Boom Blocks is worth.
So this rip-off only came about by a misunderstanding and was promptly dropped into the bowels of history, which is a shame really, as the Tengen version of Tetris is in fact far superior to the one that Nintendo later released. But you can't always have it your own way, and thus Tetris...
And Tetris...
makes a line in at number 7. Our 6th position rip-off goes to prove that not only can you get away with plagiarising another video game, but also be blatantly racist in the process.
Now, we all love punching 7 shades of pixels out of hapless opponents, Nintendo's all-time classic NES boxing title, Punch-Out!, a game that arguably has never been beaten in over 21 years.
So you'd be surprised to know that it's never been ripped off.
What? So how the heck is it in 6th place?
Well, it's actually the arcade version that's been ripped off here, my Tejan teammate, which really owes more to the Super Nintendo sequel than the NES original, as it used nearly all the same boxes, which was made 8 years after the rip-off.
Okay.
Let me explain. You see, our rip-off in question is Frank Bruno's Boxing, a game released by Elite.
The guys who made Thundercats?
Yeah, in 1986 on the Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum, which rips off the look and characters of the arcade version of Punch-Out! So it couldn't have possibly ripped off the NES version, as that wasn't released until a year later.
So you're saying Frank Bruno's Boxing is ripping off the arcade original and not the NES and SNES versions?
Yeah.
Well then, why didn't you say that in the first place?
Well, I did. Oh, never mind. Well, you'll see here that Elite did a terrible job of ripping off the characters. I mean, look at this one. The Gary Bushell Bluto lookalike here, Canadian Crusher, is a complete clone of Punch-Out's Bear Hugger.
And Andrea Punchadarov is a rip-off of Soda Popinski / Vodka Drunkinski.
Yeah, but that's where the plagiarising ends and the blatant racism begins. They rip off the Chinese Bruce Lee character from Punch-Out!, Dragon Chan, and decide to rename him Fling Long Chop.
The African boxer Tribal Trouble wears zebra boxer shorts and has a bone through his nose.
And then they just totally give up on any stereotypical wit whatsoever and just call the French boxer Frenchy France. And then it's all nicely rounded off by completely ripping off the theme tune to Rocky. I'm surprised they didn't stick Eye of the Tiger in there somewhere for good measure.
How on earth this game wasn't taken off the shelves for its over-the-top archaic racial attitude, let alone the lawsuits from Nintendo and United Artists, is a mystery that will never be solved.
But Frank Bruno's Boxing is just another example how you can completely rip off a well-known game by simply slapping on a license or celebrity's name on the cover.
Not forgetting the old, "it went under the net as it's British" excuse that Mr. Wimpy escaped with.
Indeed. So Frank Bruno's Boxing pummels its way in at number 6. Hello and welcome to the Ad Break Questionarium. Today's Cortex confusing conundrum is, which famous video game star first started out as a carpenter? Answer after the break.